Hey, it's Liberty, and today I'm going to be reviewing some Christmas mysteries. The British Library Classics Christmas Mysteries, to be exact. I read 3 of these books in the last week, and so I'm going to share my thoughts in a non-spoilery way. So if you're thinking about buying them for yourself or some friends or family, then hopefully this will be helpful. I judge mysteries based on kind of 5 main points. First being like the murder itself, the who, what, when, why of it all. The second being the characters and how they are developed over the course of the book. Third is the way the action unfolds, the plot, etc. The fourth is the resolution itself. And the fifth is kind of world building and setting. If you like this video, do give it a thumbs up, and I make videos all about books, history, personality, etc. So do check those out and subscribe if you would like to. So like I said, these books are all British Library classics, and this series started in 2012. British Library started printing out-of-print crime novels, and as of the end of 2024, there are over 130. Apparently, an editorial staff member at the British Library Publishing was reading a newspaper that said the Notting Hill Mystery was the first ever detective novel, which was published in 1865, but it was out of print for like over 150 years. So the British Library had a rare surviving first edition, so they republished it. And the response was so positive that they started to do this for more of the out of print crime novels. The focus of the collection has been the golden age of crime, which is between the 2 world wars. So many of these books were sort of allowed to go out of print so quickly that it was a really great move, not only financially, but also in terms of like literary heritage within the mystery genre. The series all have covers of different railway posters from the 1930s onwards. It's clever to like brand them that way with consistency. There's been like a real commitment to building a community of readers, which is genius because there are obviously like millions of crime lovers. The British Library, for some of them, because the copyright hasn't expired, they've had to do like genealogy and try and find the copyright holders or their descendants to try and like get a deal that way. Right now they're publishing a book a month, and you can actually subscribe to it and receive them. If you're in the UK, you get free postage, so it really is a really good deal. So that could potentially be a good Christmas present for a mystery lover in your life. Quite a few of the publications are written by people who are part of the Detection Club, which was formed in 1930 by like a bunch of British crime fiction writers, including Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, and roguely A.A. Milne. I didn't realise he wrote mystery. There are so many amazing authors who were part of that group, not just setting it up, but throughout the years. You had to be invited to join. Georgette Heyer, for example, was invited but chose not to join. She wrote detective novels as well as her Regency romance. It's still very much going today, and Martin Edwards, who does the introduction for a lot of these books, he edits the short story collections. He's basically one of the editors involved in this project, and he writes a lot of crime fiction himself, which I actually think I might want to get into. He's the current president of the Detection Club. There's also a thread that links this video with my last video, and it is the fact that one of the founders of the Detection Club was Hugh Walpole, who was related to Horace Walpole from my previous review of The Castle of Otranto being the first Gothic fiction novel. So I wrote this down. Hugh Walpole's great-great-grandfather was Horace Walpole's brother. So on to the books that I read. Oh, actually, before I start, I should mention something, that these books are a product of their time. And before publishing, the British Library deliberately did minimal editing because they wanted to sort of capture a moment in time. But so unfortunately, this means that there are stereotypes about women, Jews, Catholics, Eastern Europeans, Southern Europeans, Russians, like whatever religious and ethnic group you could kind of think of, there's something going on in at least one of these books. So just be aware. So I'm going to get into the books now, and I'm going to start with the book that I sort of recommend the most highly, which is Portrait of a Murderer by Anne Meredith. This book was written in 1933, and it shows. This book is told entirely through characters' point of view, so they think and say some offensive things, so definitely watch out for that. But the first sentence of this book is, Adrian Gray was born in May 1862 and met his death through violence at the hands of one of his own children at Christmas 1931. Every year, Adrian Gray invites his 6 surviving children to his house, King's Poplars, in the countryside, so they can all spend Christmas together. And he has varying relationships with his 6 children. None of them are that fond of him, actually, and quite a few of them have a reason to want him dead. This is not a whodunit. You witness the murder as as a reader, and you are in the head of the murderer like the whole time as, you know, they cover their tracks and try to sort of pin this murder on somebody else. You are also in the heads of all the different family members. Some of them are people that the murderer is trying to frame or target. Some of them are, you know, just other members of the family who are going to be involved with the plot further down the line. This murder happens on Christmas Eve and the body is found on Christmas Day. So it is very much a sort of Christmas family murder. I'll go over the siblings because this might actually help you get into it faster. So Richard is the oldest. He's a politician who is gunning for a place in the House of Lords and like a title to go with that. He feels like he needs to show off his wealth in order to get it. Wealth that he may not necessarily have. He is married but no children. Olivia is married to Eustace, who is frankly a dodgy finance bro. Amy has never left home and she's basically the housekeeper of King's Poplars, and she sort of has to run the house on the very small allowance that her father gives her. Isabel is back living at home because she has sort of escaped from a really horrible marriage that kind of sucked the life out of her. She was very vivacious previously and has lost all of her spark. Brand is the wayward son. He ran off to be an artist but now is working as a clerk, and he's married to someone far beneath his station and has 5 children. Ruth is basically the only happy child. She's happily married to Miles. She's got children. So measuring this book against my criteria, the murder itself, pretty standard, no spoilers, but it's not as creative as some of the murders coming up. The motive, again, like it's a bunch of family, so, you know, strong motive, everything clears, everything makes sense, very solid premise overall. The characters and their development was a real strength for this book, with a caveat. I am not wild about the fact that the dodgy finance bro is Jewish, and that is being brought up in reference to him being, you know, dodgy finance bro and his olive skin. It's a whole thing. I don't like that. However, I thought that the rest of I thought the way that the characters were constructed as people, and you're obviously like inside their heads the whole time. Masterclass by Anne Meredith. It was really, really, really well written and constructed. Like so many, look, also, I've got to say, most of these people are unlikable characters. That's the whole point. They all dislike their father dislikes most of them. Like it's the dynamics are messed up. Like I loved it. I love it when you get books like that where you kind of have to search. You're looking for little nuggets of like redemption and goodness, and you may not find any, or you may find it in unexpected places. The voices of all of these characters were really strong, and it was really well executed, especially the murderer. Like you're there every step of the way. You're with them when they're doing the crime, like through the whole process of like being in the crime scene and the days and weeks and months after. You know, you're privy to every thought behind each decision that they're making. A lot of the family have a lot of baggage coming into this, obviously. Some of it's quite public baggage. There was one conversation between 2 of the characters that really got to me. One was recounting to the other about how, you know, when they were younger, a bishop had told them, there is one unpardonable sin, and that is waste. Life's full of it. Wasted opportunity, talent, time, and generally the reason is fear. That hit me. Pretty much all the characters change over the course of the book. I love when an author really commits to giving each and every character arcs as far as they can. In terms of the action, obviously this is very much more of a psychological study almost than a murder mystery, because obviously we know who the murderer is. But throughout the whole book, I was genuinely on the edge of my seat as to whether they were going to get away with it or not. You're so invested in this person's mind. We move through their life, see their home life, how the murder is, you know, psychologically affecting them, the way that the action unfolded and all of these different layers started to unpeel and things started to happen. Was very effective. The resolution itself was good, and the conclusion was satisfying, you know, given the narrative. Like I was saying, a lot of, you know, the characters had their arcs that played out, and Isabel in particular, I loved to see where she ended up. I thought that was executed really well. In terms of the world building, I really think this is the best of all the books that I read in this video. Anne Meredith deserves so much more attention for the descriptive language that she uses, like the description of King's Poplars, as the snow has fallen, how it's set in the area, like, oh, I thought it was fantastic. She is such a good writer. Look, I'm a huge fan of long sentences and like long paragraphs of description. If you aren't, be prepared, but it is just so, so good. It's kind of like 19th century classics coded, but in a really like modern and approachable way. I gave this book 4 stars. Obviously, like, while I don't agree with some of the choices made, I thought it was really well executed and really well written, like from the characters to the setting to like, oh, it was so good. I would 100% buy it for friends and family, obviously with the caveat of like, be prepared for the, misogyny and anti-Semitism. Just be prepared. This book has also been endorsed by Dorothy L. Sayers. Next up is Dramatic Murder by Elizabeth Anthony. Now, Dramatic Murder was published in 1948. This novel is a classic whodunit. The victim is Dimpson McCade, also known as Dimpsy. He's a famous playwright who has invited his closest friends in the theatre world to spend Christmas with him at Posset Castle, which is on a private island that he owns, which is a few hours' drive away from Edinburgh. We see the murder through the eyes of 2 of the characters who are sort of driving up and discover him. Catherine Mickey is a journalist and Dr. Harley, and they find the castle deserted, and in a studio, Dimpsy is lying like in the Christmas tree, covered with lights, electrocuted by the Christmas lights. The inquest rules it an accidental death, and the cast of characters seem to have been well off with Dimpsy alive rather than dead, so not much motive, it seems like. But Catherine is uneasy and, back in London, the investigation resumes. Setting this book up against my criteria in terms of the murder, it was well thought out, the motive was strong. The murderer did become my top suspect quite early on. I didn't mind that really, because you're sort of waiting for the next clue to prove you right or to set you off on a different course. There were a couple other suspects floating around. It's quite a nice feeling though, I feel like, when you are ahead of the story and you're like, I've worked it out. Obviously, it's a dramatic murder, so that helps. Again, this is another book where the characters are a strength, not always where it was meant. This book cycles through the points of view of all the characters involved, which I personally enjoyed, because a lot of the time in mysteries you're reading from one point of view and you kind of don't really get to see how the other suspects or the other people who are closely involved, think about things. At the start, when we're in the castle, you kind of get little bits here and there of the characters, and they're sort of introduced slowly rather than like overwhelming you all at once, which I quite liked. All the characters are dynamic and intriguing in their own way. I mean, for example, there's a game hunter, there's a theatre director and his wife, there's like a whole bunch of different people. Some of the secondary and also tertiary characters were quite full-bodied to the extent that I thought they were going to be involved, but no, they were just incredibly well written. just there. I was slightly disappointed by Catherine, but then again, this is the 1940s. The inspector trying to crack the case, honestly, I don't know what he added to this really, other than like some essential information from the scene of the crime. Like he's not the focus, like it's not a police procedural. There's also some romance sprinkled in there too, if that's something you look for. All the characters are sort of in this web of like friendships, working relationships, actual relationships. So that is very interesting. In terms of how the action unfolded, I would have liked more time in Scotland to see all of them together a little bit more. But I think it worked this way around too. I mean, the clues being dropped as to like the motives in the murder, they were happening at a good pace. Obviously, I guess the murder really early on, but like I still had a great time as the events unfolded. The resolution itself was action-packed. Obviously, it would have hit harder if I hadn't have known who did it, but it fit with the concept of the book, well. It was very dramatic. And the setting in place and time, like it was also really solid. It was like a really nice slice of time, like of the 1940s Britain, which, like I said earlier, comes with downsides. In terms of the writing, like the descriptions of the Scottish castle and the landscape, really well done. And even when the action moves down to London, like obviously I know London really well, so it's nice to visit like familiar places and unfamiliar places. So all of that together, I recommend this book for mystery people. Maybe if you haven't read a lot of mysteries, or you're buying for someone who hasn't read a lot of mysteries, it might be a little bit better. It was solid. It did pretty well on my criteria. If you're looking for something set at Christmas, then definitely go for it. I gave this 3.5 stars. So finally, the last one I read was The Christmas Egg by Mary Kelly. Now, I didn't realise this was the third book in a series when I read it. And actually, I don't think the British Library Crime Classics had published the previous two. I'm not sure, I'd have to check that. But it's the same police people, like, working through all three. The scene of the crime is Islington, London, just off the high street. Princess Olga Kurukin, she fled Russia during the revolution and now lives essentially in hiding in a flat off the high street. She has been murdered and robbed 3 days before Christmas. She lives with her grandson, Ivan, but he is nowhere to be found. There have been like a string of burglaries in the area, and so like potentially this is the latest. That and the fact that a card from like a jewelry shop was found at the scene. The police are convinced like it's all connected. The egg in question is a Fabergé. The first half is a lot of like plot setup and character work, and it turns very action-packed in the second half. There are two police in this book, Chief Inspector Brett Nightingale and Sergeant Beddoes, and I won't lie, maybe this is because I listened to this as an audiobook. I regularly didn't realise who was talking and whose point of view I was at. I combined them into one character in my mind. They did, ironically, because they had banter when they were together. Like it's clear they have a working relationship. So I don't doubt that in previous books they kind of had more of a relationship. But yeah, in terms of the mystery criteria, the murder itself was boring, which sounds odd to say. But I read the book, couldn't tell you what happened or who did it or why. So it's safe to say that this book was not it for me. I did read it first, so that might contribute to that, the fact that I can't remember anything, but like I really struggled to get into this. I committed and I didn't want to DNF it, so I finished, but I was not invested. When it comes to the cast of characters, I have to say that I think some of the secondary characters were so well constructed that it was distracting. The jewelry guy, for example, like I really enjoyed reading him, and some of these characters I liked more than the detective characters. Like we just get shoved into the action. Like the detectives didn't really get much of a introduction, or I guess reintroduction. I didn't find myself rooting for them or really caring what happened to them. Any of the characters really. Action also like unfolded in a way that didn't really have me that grip. Like sometimes I felt like I didn't understand what was going on. Maybe it's just me, but I didn't really get on with the way it was written. Characters would be talking and I'd be getting confused as to like what their relationship was, because some of these characters were talking like they knew each other, but I don't think that they did. But maybe they did and it was in a previous book and I just didn't know. But why would they know each other? And surely if like the crime was so similar that they knew each other, they would reference that. Like, I don't know. The story takes us through from the 22nd of December, like through to Christmas Day, I think, which is short time frame, but it felt long. The pacing, also not great. When it comes to resolution, it was a denouement, and there was like one character basically explaining to two other characters what had happened and stuff. And by this point, I was just trying to get to the end. I didn't, I forgot the third character was even there until they said something like right at the very end, I think. They barely spoke. So, yeah. The strongest part of the book was the world building and the setting and the kind of writing in terms of like putting us into Britain in the 1950s. Mary Kelly knows how to write for sure, just maybe not all aspects. Yeah, she really captured the vibe of, Christmas in London in the 1950s, from the busy high streets to like the back streets. And when the action moves out of London in the second half, I felt like I was there. It's part of the country that I know quite well. So it was very comfortable for me to read. I feel like I knew exactly where I was. It's a very descriptive novel, which again, probably doesn't fit with the mystery aspect of things, but I liked that part of it. Sorry, I don't really have that much to say about this one. I rated it at 2.5 stars on Storygraph, which feels high, but I wanted to honour that skill of the like setting and descriptions that Mary Kelly was able to do. If you tend to like the books that I like, this may not be for you, but if you are pulled in by the description, then definitely try it. I've got to say that I read all of these on Everand, which used to be Scribd. I have a monthly subscription and you can essentially listen to audiobooks and ebooks. I think there must be like some kind of monthly cap, but I've never hit it yet. They have a bunch of the British Library crime classics on as audiobooks. So do check that out. Thank you for watching. That was my review of 3 British Library crime classics. Do let me know if you've read any of these or if you want to read any of them. If you like this video, do give it a thumbs up. I make videos all about books, history, culture, etc. So do check those out and subscribe if you would like to. This is my first time kind of really sitting down to read Christmassy books at Christmas. So I'm very curious as to if that is a thing that people generally do. Happy reading.